closer if you dare. I am the Howlerist, and the shadows you're about to encounter are spun from my own dark imaginings. Before we unravel this tale, a quick favor. A subscribe or a like helps me keep the nightmares coming. Now still your heart, let the world fade, and prepare for what lurks in the quiet. Mr. Blues, Chapter 1, Discovery. He was only 17 when he walked into the old second-hand store on Thompson Street. His grandfather used to take him to yard sales and various oddity shops to seek out whatever knickknacks and interesting pieces of history they could find. That was until last year, when he had suddenly passed away. Tommy had decided that today he was going to go exploring on his own, in memory of him. There was a bell that broke the silence as he entered the door. The store was dimly lit, almost dingy, and items seemed strewn about with no rhyme or reason, like there was little care in how they were displayed for sale. It was more like someone's neglected attic than a place of business. The air was thick with dust and the smell of camphor, kerosene, timber, and old leather. As he wandered about the place, Tommy's eye was caught by so many interesting treasures that he knew would have excited his grandfather no end. A yellowed pile of sheet music, an ice cream tub overflowing with old stamps, a vintage handmade wooden jewelry box with the initials J.A. carved into the top. There was even a beautiful yet somewhat banged-up upright piano that would have made the old man's heart leap with delight. He would have had no hesitation in sitting down to play a few tunes and treat anyone who would listen or sing along. Tommy smiled at that thought, and as he walked by, he tapped on a few random keys. They were dusty, and the ivory was broken away from a number of them. Badly in need of a tune, he noted. As he turned the corner into the next aisle, there it was, leaning unassumingly against an old rocking horse at the very end of the row. There was a lamp casting some dappled light down onto it from above, and it made the little metal pieces glint and sparkle as Tommy moved towards it. For the longest time, he stood there silently, just taking in every tiny detail. The beautiful timber curves, the rusty old strings that seemed to resemble a bird's nest in places where they had been left to decay and entwine over the years. The original pickup covers had all but disintegrated, leaving the black pickups exposed underneath. The knobs and switches were mostly cracked or broken, and most of the lacquer was yellowed and worn. But the sunburst color was still visible underneath it all. There was one tuning knob missing from the headstock, but Tommy could still clearly read the old black text. Fender Stratocaster with synchronized tremolo, original contour body. This truly was a thing of beauty. Even with all of its faults, it was clearly a historical piece that needed to be saved at all costs. With that realization, he headed straight to the front counter to speak to the cashier. Granddad had always instilled in Tommy to never tip his hand when negotiating on a gem such as this. The slightest hint of excitement from any buyer would be like the smell of blood to a shark, and this would always be reflected in the final price. "Hi there, mister," he said, as nonchalantly as he could manage. "How much have you got on the broken old guitar over there?" The old man looked up from his morning paper and peered at Tommy over the rim of his glasses. He paused for a moment, his gray eyes locked in a stare as if he had no idea which guitar Tommy had been referring to. "Ah, "That old Strat," he said finally. "Well, that has been sitting here for a while. It used to belong to an old blues player named Sidney Potts. Before this joint, I had a pawn shop, and Sidney pawned that guitar with me for $200. Said he needed to pay his rent or he'd be out on the street. That was 24 years ago, and I never saw him again. Don't think he ever made much money with his music, but man, could he play. It was like the information that briefly eluded the man was now flowing out of him like a tap had been turned on. Old Sid swore he'd be back for it, said he couldn't live without it, but it's just been sitting around here ever since. I reckon it's about time someone else owned the thing. Don't reckon old Sid is going to turn up for it anytime soon. If you want it, it still owes me that $200. Tommy could not believe his luck. What a bargain. He was sure this guitar was a collectible. He had heard his grandfather raving about the Fender Stratocaster and how it had changed music forever. He had been saving his money from his lawn mowing jobs for a while now, in the hope of starting a little buy and sell business of his own, using the knowledge he had gained from all those yard sale expeditions. "I'll take it," he said. It was such a rush. His first solo big-ticket item. Deal done. "Well, I have the old case for it out back. I will go and dig it out for you." He shuffled out through the storeroom door, which had hanging beads that rattled and clicked for what seemed like ages. Finally, he returned, back through the beads, renewing their noisy energy as he passed through them. He placed the old case on the counter and then headed toward the aisle where the guitar was located. Tommy studied the case as he waited. It was dusty and stained with imprints from various sized glasses and splatter patterns, presumably from drinks spilt. Near the handle was a rusty metal plaque mounted with something engraved on it. Tommy leaned closer to read what it said. "Mr. Blues," he read softly. As he spoke, he was sure he could hear something, like whispers. He leaned a little closer, and yes, there were voices, indecipherable voices coming from inside. He slowly reached for the latch. "It'll need some work." The cashier seemed like he was shouting as he appeared suddenly back at the counter with the guitar. Tommy jumped slightly, then smiled at his apparent silliness for imagining he was hearing things. The old man opened the latch. There was a sudden odor of old cigarette smoke and stale beer as he lifted the lid. There was a small compartment just under where the neck of the guitar sits. "May I?" Tommy asked. The clerk nodded, and Tommy lifted the lid to the compartment. There was a tarnished silver lighter engraved with Mr. Blues, just like the plaque on the outside of the case. A few leaf-shaped plastic pieces. Tommy thought these were called plectrums or picks from previous granddad lessons. Some picks were different. They seemed to resemble fingernails attached to a ring. A player would place these on their fingertips so that they could pluck the strings. There was a faded and creased business card for House of Blues, and on the back, in beautiful neat handwriting, Eleanor with 5 numbers, 41121. Finally, there was the original pawn slip for the guitar. Sidney Potts, 1954 Fender Stratocaster guitar with case, $200 with the 24-year-old date still visible. Sidney's poorly written signature was scrawled on the bottom. "A bit of history there, young fella." the cashier said as he placed the guitar back in its case. It fit snug and looked comfortable and happy to be back there. You could see imprints in the velvet lining where the strings and knobs had stamped their shape over the years. Even the discoloration of the fabric suggested it was from the greasy fingerprints of Sidney, where he had been pressing on the strings or adjusting the knobs whilst playing. Tommy was excited. This thing had history. It had to be worth a fortune, and he couldn't wait to start researching and commence restoration on this beautiful old guitar. He counted out $200 and handed it to the old man. Then he closed up the case and placed it on the floor beside him as the cashier wrote out a receipt. Paid $200 cash for Mr. Blue's guitar, 1954 Fender Strat. "Thanks so much," Tommy said. "Pleasure doing business with you. Enjoy the guitar, young fella. It won't be the same around here without Mr. Blues around." Chapter 2. Confusion. Tommy was floating on air. He barely remembered leaving the store. No memory of the 20-minute walk home, or even the ride in the elevator to the apartment on the 4th floor that he shared with Mum, Dad, and younger sister Heather. He just suddenly realized he was standing in his bedroom, staring at Mr. Blues sitting in its open case on his bed, and his room had somehow become dim. Where had the whole day gone? He had arrived at the old Thompson Street store at around 10 this morning, but as he glanced at his alarm clock, it was now 6:15 p.m., and shadows were casting long in through his window. He could hear the low voices of his family moving throughout the apartment. Mum and Heather in the kitchen making dinner. Dad in the lounge room with the TV on. Only a door separated them, but somehow they seemed so far away. Tommy was just fine here with Mr. Blues for company. A loud knock on his bedroom door. "Tommy, I'm not asking again. Your roast is getting cold." He was jolted back to reality. The room was brightly lit with warm sunlight streaming in. Tommy looked at his clock. 1:30 p.m. Roast, he thought. Sunday roast? Where had Saturday gone? Come to think of it, Friday too. Mr. Blues came home with him on Thursday. This has to be my dad playing a trick on me. I bet he changed the time on my clock to get me to run some errand or help him fix something. No need to rush then, he thought. Suddenly, Tommy was very aware that he felt cold. His room was dark, except for the light from the city. He also became aware that he could hear rain, and turned to see a heavy shower falling outside. Again, looking towards his clock, it was now 2 a.m., and as he began to process that time was once again missing, the night was suddenly broken by the loud ringing coming from his phone, and it startled him. He went over to his bedside table and picked up the mobile to see who was calling. There were 5 numbers, 41121. His mind whirled as he tried to think who could have been calling him from this strange number. But before he could answer, the ringing stopped. Dazed and confused, he stood for a moment, processing and reasoning until he finally concluded that he must have dreamt it. He placed his phone back on the bedside table and turned back towards his bed. As he turned, his phone started ringing again, and this time, it never stopped. The same 5-digit number displayed on the screen as it vibrated and screamed for his attention, demanding that he answer. Finally, he decided that he had no choice. It must be another one of Dad's pranks again, although how his non-tech-savvy brain worked out how to display that phone number, Tommy could not fathom. He reached for his phone, swiped to answer, and slowly lifted it to his ear. "Sid? Sydney, is that you?" The voice was female, old and frail, and it chilled Tommy to his very soul. "Sydney, I'm so cold here, my love. Please come and take me home." "Who is this?" Tommy asked with a quiver in his voice. After a short, awkward pause, she replied, "Eleanor." Tommy's phone fell to the floor. How could this be? He scanned the room for whoever was playing this ridiculous joke to show themselves to him, as they all had a laugh about the look on his face. But there was no one. No one but Tommy and Mr. Blues in the darkened room listening to the rain. Chapter 3. Trickery. There would be days when Tommy would not leave his room at all. His family would come and knock, but Tommy wouldn't answer. Other days, he would come out as if everything were normal. He would eat, laugh, and joke. Sometimes he would even watch the TV for a while before heading back into his room and locking the door. He would once again place the guitar in its open case on his bed and stand there, staring at it for hours and hours on end. Every night at around 2 a.m., his phone would receive a call from that same strange 5-digit number, but now he would calmly answer. "Hello? Eleanor? Sid? Sydney, is that you?" "Yes, my love, it's me." "Oh, Sydney, why did you leave me here in the cold, my love? Please, come and take me home." They would chat until the dawn broke. Tommy would once again become aware of his surroundings, but with huge chunks of missing time. In fact, the majority of his life now was missing time, and there only seemed less and less of himself. For as soon as he would place the guitar in its open case on his bed, he would be no longer self-aware, just like he was gone. After many months of this, Tommy was no longer in control of his presence. He was almost never leaving his room these days, only to eat once a day. And this was usually in the early hours of the morning, just before or just after his phone call with Eleanor. One night, it was particularly dark. There was no moon this night, and there had been a power outage, so no light from the city outside was streaming in his window. This meant that Mr. Blues was almost in total darkness, and Tommy couldn't look at his precious Mr. Blues at all. At 2 a.m., when the phone rang, Tommy was only barely aware of the strange number that was calling him. 41121, he thought. What an unusual number. When he answered the call, on came the frail woman's voice. "Sid? Sydney, is that you?" Suddenly, there was a loud static on the line. It sounded like lightning crackling through an old radio, and it was almost deafening. Then Tommy heard a voice screaming his name. "Tommy! Tommy!" The male voice was so familiar to him, and even though it was filled with urgency, it still felt calming to him. "Tommy, you must listen to me and do what I say. Tommy, say you will." But Eleanor interrupted. "Sid? Sydney, is that you?" "Tommy, you must listen to me and do what I say," the male voice persisted. "Sydney, I'm so cold here, my love. Please come and take me home," Eleanor interjected once again. "Tommy, you must close the guitar case. You must do it now, son." "Tommy, where are you, my love? I'm so cold, Sydney." But the male voice would not let up. "Tommy, shut the case now." Tommy suddenly realized he knew that voice. It was his grandfather, and with that, he slammed the lid down on the guitar case. "Tommy, can you hear me? Please tell me you can hear me." "Yes, Granddad, I can hear you." "Oh, thank goodness. I have been trying to reach you for the longest time, but Sydney has had such a hold on you. I just couldn't get through. My dear boy, you must do exactly what I say. Will you do that for me, Tommy?" "Yes, Granddad. I'll do whatever you say." "All right. Put the phone on loudspeaker and place it in your shirt pocket so I can still talk to you. We must not lose this connection, or I may never reach you again. Can you do that, son?" "Yes, Granddad," Tommy replied, almost robot-like as he carried out Granddad's instructions. "Okay, now do up that case and wrap your blanket around it. I need you to carry it to the bathtub. Can you do that, son?" "Yes, Granddad." Tommy fastened the latches and wrapped his blanket tightly. Then he lifted up the entire bundle and headed towards the bathroom. As he walked, his grandfather continued, calmly encouraging him. "That's it, son. Keep going. You're doing great. You can do this. Not long now." The lightning crackles kept happening as Granddad talked, but his voice remained calm and steady, and it reassured Tommy to keep going. "That's it, Tommy. Now put the entire bundle into the bathtub and lock the door." Tommy did as the voice told him, so it continued. "I need you to open the top vanity drawer and take out your sister's perfume bottle. Take off the lid and pour the perfume over your blanket. That's it, Tommy. Well done, son. Can you see the matches on the shelf next to the candles? Tommy, I need you to light the blanket. Do it now, son. Do it now." Tommy hesitated for a moment, grasping at the madness of this situation. But if there was one person Tommy trusted with his life, it was his grandfather. As he dropped the match, the perfume burst into flames. Suddenly, the small room was glaringly bright, and Tommy had an urgent realization that he was now locked in the bathroom with a roaring inferno. "Tommy, go get your dad." Tommy moved towards the locked door. As he unbolted it and pulled it open, he almost bowled his dad over as he ran out of there. The smoke detectors were all screaming. His dad was already at the door with the fire extinguisher. Chapter 4. Awakening. There was minimal damage to the family's bathroom, just some charring to the roof. The porcelain tiles in the bathtub had managed to contain most of the heat, so once they were replaced, it was as good as new. Tommy had been so excited to find Mr. Blues in the hope that it would kick off a new business venture in memory of his grandfather. As it turned out, his grandfather was still there for him, even though he was no longer on Tommy's plane. Tommy spent a long time trying to make sense of the experience. He decided to return to the second-hand store on Thompson Street. Maybe the old man knew something else about Mr. Blues that he had forgotten to mention. As Tommy rounded the corner and looked across the street where the old store was, the back of his neck suddenly tingled as his heart skipped a beat. What the hell? The entire block where the old store had stood only months before was simply a vacant lot. Even the other shops that he remembered next door were gone. There were no building remnants at all. No evidence that there had ever been any structure present at any time. It was misty, dank, and overgrown with weeds almost up to the waist. In total disbelief, Tommy crossed the street to look closer. As he pressed his face to the wire fence, he felt a cold chill engulf him. He jumped as his phone suddenly vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out and focused on the calling number. 41121.